Hi, my name is Steve.
Hi, I'm Erin, Wayne, also known as Aureylian.
And Erin, what would you describe yourself as?
Oh man. I would describe myself as a person who cares a lot about a lot of things, primarily around gaming and the gaming industry, but also nonprofit work, charity, DEI, all those fun things about making the world a better place.
Man, it's almost like you are a good fit for this show. You should probably do this show one day, just so you know. It's really good.
I would love to do this show. Can I be on it?
I'll think about it, honestly.
Okay.
Yeah, get to your agent, well, my agent, something, $5,000. So,
Cryptocurrencies,
that's right.
stocks.
Please send me Dogecoin.
Yes.
So let's start out sort of at the beginning. As I say, this is always a nod to Inside the Actor Studio. So inside the Erin studio here, where did Erin grow up?
Oh, I grew up in the Midwest in St. Louis, which is still where I am today. am one of the 83% of people or something that never leaves more than 30 miles from where they grew up. So that's me. I grew up out in the suburbs of St. Louis.
I think we're literally 2 minutes into the show. You're already throwing out facts for people to absorb. All right, it's going to be a good show.
Just a wealth of really just the trivia. Someone's going to fact check this in the comments, be like, she was wrong about that, Stack. She was wrong about that. I don't know exact numbers. It's just ish.
Ish. All right, we'll take ish here, to be honest. We don't have...
Plus or minus 10% on everything I say.
We don't have the money to be sponsoring that kind of thing. So you could have been like 5% and I'm like, yeah, sounds about right. Yeah, cool.
That's right. That's right.
So what was it like growing up near, in sort of a kind of a bustling area, but also kind of homey?
Yeah. I mean, for us, it felt pretty normal. I've had really weird things happen to me as a kid. So the house that I grew up on was purchased out of eminent domain.
Ooh.
And they tore it down and built a runway. We didn't have a choice. We were like, you have to leave. You have to move. So that was a weird part of our childhood. But other than that, I mean, it was a pretty standard thing. That's how it's not a standard experience for anybody. Standard experience.
No. Yeah, I lost my house because they had to put a runway on it. Oh, yeah. All right. Well.
Other than that one thing, though, okay. It was a pretty normal childhood. I have 2 older sisters and an older brother. So we spent lots of time at softball games and wrestling matches and playing outside. And my dad and his friends and my brother are huge into tabletop gaming. So I spent a lot of my weekends tabletop and video gaming with my dad and my brother.
Yeah.
Pretty normal.
And so what was it like growing up with dad and brother?
Good. It was really good. My dad and my brother both are huge parts of who I am. I get my nerdy sides from both of them. My brother is a huge part of my career. He goes with me to TwitchCons a lot. He's traveled with me to a lot of gaming conventions.
Aww.
He's been in videos with me when I was a content creator. So they're huge parts of who I am, and I'm still very close with them today, for sure.
So what does Dad think about this whole video game business that you're on, all sides of it, by the way?
Yeah, they both think it's pretty cool. My whole family, I think, thinks it's pretty cool, even if they don't necessarily understand it. My mom's not huge into gaming, but she also has gone with me to gaming conventions and she's traveled with me a lot. And so I think they think it's pretty cool for various reasons. Obviously, my dad's into gaming, and so he thinks it's cool from that side. My mom thinks it's cool just to kind of see her daughter grow up and succeed and do cool things that people have never done before. So
breaking barriers. Okay. All right. So, let's start talking about the nitty-gritty of Erin. What was it like to be this person who it kind of is out there and breaking these barriers? Obviously, your jobs are usually first of their kind or kind of more elevated. You come from a content creator background. How's that been for you psychologically, mental health-wise, to be that person on the front lines?
Yeah, it's different. It's weird to have somebody be like, oh, you're breaking barriers, because I don't think I've ever personally thought about it that way.
That's what I do
don't
here.
Think I've ever...
Weird question.
Yeah, I think I have really just tried in the industry to look at opportunities to address problems. And so when you're addressing problems, you're creating solutions to fix those problems. And in gaming, because our industry is not very old and this, compared to the span of other things, especially when it comes to my work at Twitch, because Twitch is also not that old of a company, there were a lot of things that had never been done before. There's no playbook. And so a lot of the work that I did was just looking at things that people needed and finding out solutions that would fit those needs in ways that we're not just taking what somebody else did and expecting it to work in those places. So it's good. I would consider myself a lot more of a creative person than I would like a business or strategy. But it's been fun. I've really enjoyed my career, and I'm really excited to keep going and keep seeing where it goes.
I love it, and one of the primary reasons that I invited you here and that I think you can teach the audience who's listening at home some stuff is because of the duality of Aureylian. So everyone knows the Aureylian, the mouthpiece of Twitch, the one that has to go between, the corporation and the people. But you and I have had, some great personal conversations where we've gotten to talk about, how we really feel about things. And I think a lot of us, particularly content creators, can completely sympathize with, you gotta do what the company says, but you also have your own personal feelings, without going into specific issues here. How was that for you? How did you manage to survive that? And how do you tell others how to navigate those same brand lines and me lines?
Yeah. I think that the biggest issue with communication, especially when it comes from businesses to users, whether that's Twitch to the Twitch community or it's any company, right? ISPs to their consumers when there's internet outages, like the thing that we get really hung up on is the actual lack of clarity and understanding. And so a large part of when you are working on communications or you're having, whether it's personal communications or it's just your own opinion, a large part of it is just making sure that there's context and people understand where you're coming from. And so the most difficult part really for me has been when there's a lot of misinformation or a belief about a certain thing or something that I've said. There's been instances where I have said something on Twitter or something that gets, taken out of context or isn't fully clear. I didn't explain myself very well. The biggest opportunity that we have is to provide that context, that education, and be more clear. And so that's the hardest part, is that sometimes there are facts that you can't say. Yeah. There are realities of a situation that you can't come out and say, well, here's the truth about the thing because it's under NDA or it's not able to be released yet. And that's the hardest part, because really, for me personally, it's just I want to make sure that everybody understands that if there's a product that they want or a situation that they're unhappy with, that they understand why their desired outcome isn't possible. And when you can't disclose all the information, that's often the hardest part. And so really working in what am I allowed to say? I operate a lot in the gray areas, which is you told me not to do this, but you didn't say I couldn't do this, or these other things are things that I can talk about. Yeah. That's usually where I sit.
Have you found that that helps with personal communication a lot? Does your training come into play at all in your personal relationships, friendships?
Sometimes, sometimes there are just truly things that you can't say. Right? Sometimes there are just things that you're I agree with you, but not being able to disclose facts doesn't mean that you can't have empathy. Yeah. Admitting that a situation sucks or is bad is always okay. It's always okay to have empathy. And there's never a world in which you either say nothing or have your cards on the table. There's definitely a power, I think, in going to somebody and saying hey, I can't help you, but I am sorry that this is happening, or I feel your frustration. What else can I do? I'm here to support you. How else can I help you? Right? Is it a listening ear? Is there something that you want me to pass up? And so I think that that's really where I've tried to be, is that just making sure that you operate with a lot of empathy and can acknowledge when a situation is bad. That goes a long way. Sometimes people don't actually expect you to solve it. They just want to know that you hear them and that you also agree that this is not how it should be. There's a lot of power in just having empathy.
Yeah, it's wild how sometimes we don't need someone to give us advice. We just need someone to be there for us. What have you found?
Yeah.
What are some of the ways you like to be there for someone who you can't physically just sit down next to you on a bench?
I think there's a lot of power in conversation, whether that's text or phone call, or even sometimes just offering hey, is there anything that I can do now or later? There's a lot of times where when people are in situations, especially situations that aren't good, it can be overwhelming to have people come to you and say, how can I help? How can I help? How can I help? And a large number of times, people will get offers of help in the moment, but 6 weeks down the line or 6 months down the line, people are oh, well, that was 6 months ago. You don't need my help anymore. But that's not true. Sometimes the fallout of a situation or sometimes the ripple effect can last for a really long time. And so I also like to tell people, like, my door isn't open temporarily. Like, if you need something from me, like, I am here always. So if 6 months down the line you need help, please come to me and ask me for that. And that's been, especially since I've left Twitch in the last couple of weeks, I've told a lot of people that if you still need something, come to me. I'm thankful that people have taken me up on that offer. Hey, I need someone to talk to. Hey, I need support. I'm like, cool, sure. Like, how can I help? Just being open and not gating to support or offers of support in a limited time fashion, and just really being cognizant that people sometimes will need help and it's not apparent is really important.
I think that's a great piece of advice. And I love going to this logical conclusion, which is, how do you protect yourself on the other side? How do you make sure that you're not emotionally overwhelmed?
That's probably my biggest area of improvement. I try to set boundaries for myself. There are certain things I can't do, and I will tell people that. If somebody says, like, I want you to do X, Y, and Z, or I expect this thing to happen, I will be very honest and say, I can't do that. That's not within the remit of my role, or that's not something I can personally do. I try to do that. I also try to mentally prepare myself whenever especially when things are controversial or are really topics that are passionate to people that they really care about. I'm really going into it and saying, okay, I recognize before even talking about it or appearing on the thing or talking to X news media outlet that people may say A, B, and C. And if they say A, B, and C, what am I going to do in those instances? And how do I prepare myself ahead of time? And so it's both proactive kind of boundary setting or expectation setting, and then reactively understanding that it is okay to admit that you can't do everything.
Yeah.
Like, I can't be a miracle worker. There's just some things I can't do. And I can listen for sure 100% of the time, but I can't fix everything.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. Have you found in the content creator world, especially, that those kind of keeping those mental barriers up is important? I mean, we all get kind of taxed in this industry a lot.
Yes. I've learned over almost a decade of being around the space that personally there are some things I'm just not going to talk about. Especially probably in the last 3 years, I've made a much more conscious effort of not talking about everything and all the time. There are certain things that are really, really important to me personally that I know my mental health cannot withstand people criticizing. And so I choose not to share those things. I choose not to put certain parts of myself or my health or my family out on the internet because people aren't entitled to know everything about me. And I have to protect my own self, which is a lesson that I've learned not easily, to learn when it's okay for me to share things and what I'm okay being criticized and what I can mentally handle. And sometimes those levers change day by day. Sometimes I'm in a much better mental health space and I'm like, cool, I don't care what people have to say. I'm like excited to share this. And sometimes I'm like, really bad mental health day. I'm not going to tweet for 3 days. But that's okay. Like, we're flexible. We're people. We change every day and our things change every day. But it has been really important, I think, to me to not just gutturally react to something and not just be like, oh, I did a thing, I have to tweet it. Or like, oh, I did a thing, I have to share it. And I will think about things for hours, which is probably a little over the top, but that's just how it works for me personally.
I know a lot of people who do a lot of thinking and overthinking. Have you developed very good ways of stopping yourself when you catch yourself in those overthinking cycles?
I am really lucky that I have been in therapy for over 5 years now, I think. Maybe 5.5 years. And so I have worked a large part of that time on developing those techniques of how do I recognize when I'm in that space? What are my emergency levers? What happens when something kind of spins out of control and I don't know what to do? And so I've worked to develop those types of techniques with my therapist so that I know how to handle them. And everybody obviously is different, but I definitely feel like I've gotten a lot of help and support to do that. People that I trust, hey, what do you think about saying this? Hey, do you think this is okay? I have worked a lot with PR people on training how to speak, when to speak, how to think in situations where somebody catches me off guard. And so I'm also very thankful that between therapy and PR people, I've like learned how to manage those responses in ways that keep me safe.
Have there been techniques that you have liked more than others that you think might help other people?
I think sitting on things is really powerful. I think the age of the internet and our impulses and our expectations as a society to, I want to do a thing, and so I'm going to do the thing right now, right? We want instant gratification for things a lot as society. And so I think definitely learning how to think about something before I do it. If something even sparks a, should I do that? Should I not do that? I'll wait for hours or days, depending on what it is, before I will say something. I have a trusted group of friends that I will go to and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Do you think I worded this appropriately? We tend to think that people just are good at everything that they do. And the reality is we often have a lot of people behind the scenes supporting us, helping us figure out those things. They don't just come out perfect on the first time.
They don't. They never do. And
no.
You mentioned something earlier, too, about sharing yourself. Is there ways that you like to share yourself and ways that you don't? How do you, determine this is not something I want to put on social media? As today, we are expected to share just about all of ourselves as content creators.
Yeah, that's overwhelming, isn't it?
It is.
Like the idea of everything that we do and eat and watch and have an opinion on is like subject to everybody else's. One, it does not scale and it's unrealistic. Like we can't do that. And it's also just bad for our mental health, I think. I think that it's really important for us to be able to have things that are ours and things that we can hold close to ourselves. And I know, like, for me, that's kayaking. I go kayaking because it gets me out of the internet and reminds me that, like, there's a whole world. And when I go kayaking, I don't go by myself. I go with my brother or a girlfriend or my mom or my dad to remind myself that, like, I have tangible human relationships and I am somebody's daughter and somebody's friend outside of being someone on the internet, which can be really grounding. So, like, for me personally, that really helps. And the things that I think I've chosen to share or not share are those things that I find like very personal to who I am. Things that are about philosophical or religious beliefs or my parenting styles or things that are not things that people can understand without a deep amount of context. No. Right? I don't want to put out 10% and have someone assume they know 100%. And with really complex or personal topics like your belief on religion or philosophical ideas or politics or parenting or personal relationships, those are things that, like, I just don't feel like 240 characters can accurately produce. And so I choose to sometimes keep those a little bit kind of closer to who I am, to one, set good boundaries and my mental health, protect that. But also just because I can't spend all day clarifying my belief on a very complex topic. Like, I have things to do. And so a lot of it is just like that. Like, do I believe that people can get a sense of who I am or what I believe about this thing? Picture my dog, share all day long. What you see is what you get. He's a goofball. Pictures of like my Warhammer minis, like, great. You could see what you get. But I want people to know, again, a sense of who I am. I want people to look at my Twitter and be like, oh yeah, she's a dork and a mom and has cats and she loves to go outside and bake. Like, I want you to know who I am without having to like reveal every crevice and like part of my soul.
I can completely understand it. And honestly, it's strange because the reason why this show exists is to be able to ask those questions and give that space for that nuance that we don't necessarily get as creators, as internet personalities. And, I'm saying if you have more than 500 or 600 followers, you are even a low level, quote unquote, internet personality. People see 500 followers and they're like, oh, that's tiny. That's 500 people. Well, 400 when you take out the bots.
That's a lot. Yeah. That's like more than some high schools.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And we all have to have opinions and everybody wants to know the same 25 things and nothing else. And that's one of the things that I like about this show. It's like, I can ask you, what do you believe about souls? Do they exist? What do you think about fame? What is it like? And I think you have a more nuanced conversation about those deep topics. And I think one of the hardest things for me, at least, and you tell me, is navigating Steve versus Steve. At least you have Erin versus Aureylian. At least your names are different, mine are the same. But, what do you think? How do you think people perceive Erin versus Aureylian?
I like to believe that they're the same. I like to believe that who I have been as a content creator or who I am on social media is who I am. It's just only a small part of who I am, right? And so there's obviously a lot more context and nuance and beliefs and dynamic to that. Now, not all content creators are the same. Some content creators put on a persona and who they are in real life is different from their persona. Yeah. I have tried not to be that way. So I like to believe that Aureylian is very close to Erin. You just see only some of it and not like the whole picture.
Yeah, I tend to be the same way. As I try to be me here or me off camera. I think most people know me say it's pretty close. There's probably a little bit of difference, a little bit of energy difference, but it's pretty close. But there's other creators like Ethan Crank Gameplays was in your seat, and he was very frustrated by the subject, saying that most people don't know him, and he's worried that people don't care to know him. Is that a question that ever crosses your mind? Like, I sure hope people would want to know who I really am.
I hope that people see, this is going to sound like very emotional. I hope people see my heart.
Okay.
Not necessarily know me. It is impossible for everyone to know me personally. But I think what I have tried to do really hard is reflect in personal and private conversations and in the way that I approach who I am as a representative of a company or a brand when I'm doing any type of like influencer campaigns. That kind of part of who I am is like a good person, wants to make things better, truly cares about things, is actively listening, supports diversity and inclusion. I hope that those things resonate with people. And because that's kind of my goal, I don't necessarily think that people have to know who I am. They don't have to know my really deep, dark personal secrets. Some of them I've shared on my YouTube channels and other things, but I don't think you have to know those stories to like know at the core kind of who I am. And so for me personally, that's important to me that like people think that I'm a good person and they see the work that I tried to do. But I also hope that people do care. It is really hard in our industry, I think, for anybody, whether you're a content creator or an influencer or somebody in the industry. I think there's always that spark in the back of your mind of like, are people talking to me because they like me? Or are people talking to me because they like the perception of what I can help them with? I think that's just a jaded part that everybody in the industry has had somebody that liked them for the latter and not the former. And we all get a little bit burned by that. And so I try to just be optimistic and assume the best intent of everybody. But I know that I also operate and that I really truly only have like a very small, close circle of friends who do actually know me as Erin, probably for that reason.
Yeah, it's something that has been a frustration, I think, on both ends. So there's the top content creators that kind of are walled off at this point, where they kind of stay in their clique, and that's about the only place they go. And then there's the people who are a step or two down, who still try to reach and elevate other people. And I'm very thankful for those creators. I think those are the real heroes in a lot of our industry.
Yeah.
But I think it is frustrating for smaller creators because they can't get to these people that they feel like they would gel with. And so when you are, someone who's just kind of starting out, no matter what career it is, because this is not a podcast about just content creators, but no matter where you are in life, how do you go about reaching out to the people that you idolize, that you'd like to learn from?
I think that I have tried to realize that everyone is a person at the end of the day, right? And so a lot of the people that I have come to admire and look up to are not necessarily people that would be inaccessible to me, but rather are people that are impacting my life because they're a peer that I work with or a manager or somebody in the industry that I've had the opportunity to work with. And in that instance, it makes it a lot easier for me to go to them with questions. Hey, I'm not sure how to handle this situation. Hey, I would really love your mentorship or advice on these types of topics. And a lot of times, and I've been very fortunate in this regard, a lot of times the people that I work with, they know me. And so there's already that kind of trust that's built. So when I go to them and say, hey, can you mentor me? Hey, can you offer me advice on this situation? They're very open and receptive to it. I think it's harder when you're starting out in an industry or you're new to a job to immediately go to somebody you've never met before and be like, hey, I like you, mentor me. It's just like walking up to a random person on the playground and be like, do you want to be my best friend? That like works for some kids and they like have lifelong friends. And if you were like me as a kid, that never worked because I was like weird and awkward. And so I think that that's what I've tried to do is really look at the people who are impacting my immediate job, career, life, family, and trust those people. And then reach out to them kind of once I've had an opportunity to work with them. It's always been a little bit easier that way.
I really like that. And I like sort of that same approach of I'll make friends with somebody and I don't ask them for anything. Like I really feel like part of my success personally, what I always recommend to people is if you want to be an honestly good person, make friends with someone and talk to them and don't ask them for stuff. Like, because the amount of people who are like, oh, you want to be friends? Let's be friends. It's so cool. Also, can I come on your podcast? There's the ask in the same sentence and you're just like, damn it.
Yeah. Do you want to hear a funny story about how I met one of my best friends?
No, I hate stories.
Okay, well, I'm going to take you on a trip anyways.
Okay, let's go.
So one of my very best friends to this day, I'm planning her baby shower. She was at my wedding. We're very, very good friends. Started out because she was one of the meetup organizers for one of the Twitch community meetups. Mm-hmm. And so I had met her. She used to run the St. Louis chapter. Mm-hmm. So I had met her at an event. And at the event, she had said, hey, would you want to grab dinner sometime? And I was like, sure, okay, fine. And I'm expecting the whole time that she wants to talk to me about these community meetups because that's how I met her. That was the only context in which I knew her. We didn't follow each other on Twitter. Like we knew nothing about each other. And so the day comes, we're supposed to have dinner. I had a childcare emergency. And so I texted her and I said, hey, I'm really sorry. I've got to bring my daughter to this dinner. She said, oh, don't worry about it. So we get to this dinner, the whole hour and a half. I'm like, what questions do you have? How can I help you? Like I'm full on just business mode the whole dinner. Mm-hmm. So after the dinner is over, she says, do you want to walk around the mall? Because we had dinner like in a restaurant that was attached to the mall. And I was like, oh, that's kind of weird. I've never shopped with somebody like on a business dinner, but like, sure, I guess. So for like another hour, we walk around. I'm still chatting about business. We get done. We walk out to the car. And she was like, cool, so this is really fun. Do you want to do something next time, but without talking about business? And I looked at her and I was like, oh my God, you want to be my friend? And she like looked at me. I said it out loud because that's how awkward and terrible I am. And she was like, why did you think I invited you to dinner? And I, in my brain, could not fathom somebody asking me to go to dinner to hang out with me. And instead spent this whole time, and she is like, you're an idiot. And we've been best friends like, ever since. But that's what it was. She sat there the whole time, and she was like, okay, cool, can we do this again? But can you just like not talk about work the whole time? And I was like, oh my God, you wanted to be my friend.
Oh, no. Oh, Erin. Oh, that is such a good story. Oh.
But that's how she's my friend now.
Oh,
so.
No, hey, it worked out in the end. That's really all that matters with that.
You know? It's great.
Oh, how have you even managed in this industry to walk that line between friend and content creator? Like, do you feel like at this point you're just always like, that person always wants to? Did that teach you anything, or do you feel like now you still have that wall up when you meet somebody?
I don't know. I mean, I definitely think that I'm the same person in and out of work, so I don't know that. I think I am guarded about. Just similarly how I would be on social media, I'm guarded about the types of like personal things about myself that I share. I don't just like kind of open book my whole life to everyone. But I think I can generally sense when people are reaching out because they have a professional question or a work question, or they want professional mentorship. People are usually pretty clear about that. And so it's good in that way. But I don't think I consciously think about it because I tend to try to be the same. You wouldn't meet somebody for the very first time and like divulge. I mean, maybe you would. I wouldn't meet somebody for the first time and like tell my whole life story. Even outside of work, I wouldn't like meet somebody, on the street and do that. And so I wouldn't do it in a professional setting either. But I try to just assume that everybody's coming to something with a good intent. And to be clear, it is totally okay if somebody like reaches out to me and is like, I don't want to be your friend. I just want to talk about work. That's totally okay. Like, that's what I'm here for as a like community person, as a public person. You don't have to like me at all. Like, that's totally okay. I'm just here to make sure that you're happy, right? And that doesn't have anything to do with me. That's just me as a public servant to like what I do. And so it's totally okay too if people are reaching out to me and they just say like, I just have a question about what's going on. Cool. How can I help? Right? Like, we don't have to small chat. How's your life? How's your cat? That's fine. You don't have to do that. It's okay if you just are like, hey, I don't take that personally. And in fact, like, that's totally okay.
How do you do that? How do you flip that switch in your brain? Because I think a lot of people out there, again, not content creation, in every single industry, I think they feel like they have to make everyone in their chosen profession like them. How do you not feel that way?
Well, one, because it's impossible.
Ooh.
People are just not. Somebody is not going to like me at some point, and that's okay. Like, I understand that. I hope people like me. I hope people give me the chance. But it is just possible that there are certain personalities. There are people that I deeply respect and who deeply respect me, and we just have very different personalities, and that's okay. As a part of who I am as a community person, right? I am a public servant in the way that a representative would be, or a way that a waitress would be, or a way that somebody else of like, I'm here to do a job. I'm here to make sure you have what you need. And it is more important for me to make sure that you feel comfortable to come to me or express an opinion, or to know that I'm here to advocate for you, or here to give you advice, or here to give you something that you need. And that has nothing to do with me as a person. That has to do with what I'm able to do and how I'm able to do my job. And so I feel like I can separate those two things pretty well. And I hope that I do both of them okay. But they're different, right? I want people to say, yeah, Erin's got my back, or yeah, Erin's going to get me. She's going to work hard to get me anything she can, or she's going to try to solve this problem, or she's going to advocate for whatever the thing is going on. And that doesn't have to do with whether or not you like me, really.
It has to do with doing a job. And I think that is something we sort of take for granted in a lot of instances in life, in that sometimes we just want to be polite and we don't necessarily want to make best friends. What do you do when you do want to make friends? Is there an approach that you personally advise people do when it's like, I don't particularly want to go, just make a content with this person. I want to actually like go hang out at a barbecue.
I am very shy, like painfully shy. I was telling somebody this the other day on Twitter. I don't think I ate in the cafeteria in middle school one time.
Wow.
I would hide in my mom's classroom because I was like so terrified of asking to sit with someone and having them tell me no. So just me as a person, I'm actually a very, very introverted, shy person. So for me, like, how do I make friends? The answer is like, I don't. I like hope that they just will come to me and tell me that they want to hang out, because I'm so, it's so intimidating for me to do that. And I am really glad that a lot of my close friends are extroverts. And so they're like, you're my person now. And I'm like, okay. And then I'm just their person, because I think I struggle with that probably as much, if not more, than most people.
Yeah, I mean, introvert, extrovert, especially if you're in the business of being communications, there does have to be a very fine line you have to walk. So, let's just talk a bit about who you are. When we're talking about limitations on people in general, do you think that we have limitations on how much friendship we can handle, how many friends we can have?
Maybe. I think it's different for everybody, probably. There's a really good book for kids, and I don't know the name of it off the top of my head, but it has to do with buckets.
Okay.
And it's basically, the analogy in this book is that everybody has a bucket, and everybody's bucket is different. Your bucket might be bigger than my bucket. My bucket might have more holes in my bucket than your bucket, but everyone has a bucket, and how much we can handle is dependent on that. And so sometimes we have friends, we can have one friend that takes everything out of our bucket, or we can have 100 friends who take nothing out of our bucket. And when our bucket is empty, we can't do anything at all, right? Our job as people is to make sure that our bucket is constantly full, and that our friends and the people that we surround ourselves with are both taking from and replacing the bucket as much as they can. And so I think at the end of the day, yes, I think there is some type of limit to us, but sometimes it's not about our friendships. It might be that our work is draining our bucket faster than our friends. It might be that our friends are overflowing our bucket so that work pulling out of it doesn't impact us as much. But I think everybody's amount is different, and certain things take more out of that, whether it's social media or a job or pressure at home or difficult situations with our family or friends or whatever the case may be. So we all have limits, for sure. Everybody does. They're just going to be different and dependent on who we surround ourselves with and the situations that we have. But it's really just, I think, important for us as people to recognize that we can't be good if our buckets are constantly empty. And so what we have to do is make sure that the people we surround ourselves with or the situations we put ourselves in or our work environments, our home environments, make sure that our bucket's not draining faster than we can fill it.
I really love that parable. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. It's a good book for little kids. It's a really good book for little kids. I'll try to find it. We can link it in the comments.
I'll definitely link it in the comments below because, it's wild to me. Sometimes the most basic things that we as adults forget are included in children's material. I've talked about this a couple of times. Some of the biggest life lessons I've learned have been from Nickelodeon cartoons. Like, things that you wouldn't think that, like, oh, it's about an aardvark having a party. But it's actually about an aardvark having a party because one of his friends didn't show up and how he dealt with that. And it's like, there's actually some pretty deep-seated information in there, too.
I have a Dr. Seuss word tattooed on my hand, so, like, I feel all of that. Yeah.
What's your Dr. Seuss word?
I have the word unless...
Okay.
tattooed on my hand, which is written on the stone from the Lorax.
Okay.
So if you haven't seen the Lorax or read the Lorax, it's a really good book. It's a lot about environmentalism. It's a guy who, like, cuts down all these trees and doesn't understand the impact that it's going to have. But the quote from Unless is, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing's going to get better. It's not.
Aww.
And so it's just a reminder that, like, we have to be the change that we want to see in the world, and we have to be the ones that go out of our way to make sure that we're doing the things that we want to see other people do.
Wow. Well, that's actually a really good sentiment.
It's a good movie. I cry in all movies, but, like, that movie, I cry specifically hard anytime the Lorax pops up. It's a good... Taylor Swift's in it. You should go see it.
I mean, we got a recommendation now. If only we can get her to come talk to us.
I know. I don't have any of those strings.
No.
No.
Two of us combined don't have that kind of power, but...
Remember we talked about things that I can't do? Right. This is one thing I'll tell you. Like, look, I would help you, Steve, as much as I can. That's the thing I can't do.
That's the thing I can't do for you either. So, yeah, no, we're kind of... Yeah, I mean, I could get you, like, Bobby Swift. He's, like, the guy who cleaned up her shoes one time. That's about close as I can get, honestly. So how does an Erin measure those kinds of moral / doing good for the world successes? How do you move the needle?
Slowly. Yeah. Every day. Yeah. I think it's really hard. Those are the things that I think drain my bucket the most because I care a lot about them. I don't know that I particularly do the best job maybe on social media of being like, I cried 3 times today over this topic. That means a lot to me. But I think that what I try to do in situations is be able to look back and say, did I do the most that I could do that day? Did I find a solution, talk to a person, advocate for a thing, send an email, talk to a person, be a listening ear? And I think that I just try to look at situations and say, did I do the best that I could? And if the answer to that is yes, then I've done the thing that I can. But a large part of that is balancing that there are very few times where an individual action is going to solve a problem. Right? Problems are often solved by doing a lot of small things repetitively over and over and over again, which can feel very defeating. Sometimes it can feel like you're not going anywhere. I'm sure you've experienced this in your work too. Like nothing good comes easily. Yeah. And so sometimes it's also kind of like looking at like stocks. Like you probably don't want to check your stocks every day. You want to look at like growth over 6 months or a year or 10 years. And so I try to just did I do the best that I could today? Yes. And in the last 6 months, have I been able to make active change? Did I get a thing done? Did I get a solution ready? Did I help address a community concern? Did I put out a piece of education? Usually the answers to those things is like, yes, I did as much as I could. When the answers to that is no, is when I'm like off to the most upset. No. But sometimes those things are out of my control and I can only impact what I can impact. But it's just really trying to evaluate, my ability to do as much as I could and not giving up when it feels like it's not doing anything.
How do you deal with things when you can't control them and you know you can't?
Oh my gosh, I cry. I do cry. I'm ornery in the way that I don't accept no a lot of times. Like, I am the annoying kid that always asked why. My mom was like, no, you can't do that. I'd be like, why? Why? What are your concerns? And so a lot of the things that I've done in my career are people say no for reasons, right? Not necessarily all the time, and this is not about like personal boundaries, but a lot of things when it comes to solving work problems. If somebody says no, okay, walk me through why, right? Because I believe that most problems other than like death and taxes are solvable problems.
Okay.
And so if you tell me why something is an issue and I can solve that issue, then I can solve the bigger issue. And so a lot of things that I've tried to do in my career is like, okay, you're concerned about that. I'll solve that. What's next?
Yep.
That's the thing. Okay, I'll solve that too. And then once we solve all of these underlying issues, well, here we've come up with a solution to the bigger issue. And so a lot of it is being annoying in some ways, and being ornery and saying, why is that a problem? Why is this something that we're not able to do? Okay, well, if we can't do that, can we do this? The number of times, if I have $1 for every time in my career, someone was like, yeah, we can do that. Probably retire early, because that's what I've done is just when people say no, there's often room for exploring the space. Okay, well, what can I do? And I just kind of refuse to give up that way.
And sometimes resiliency is more important than being strong or being witty. It's a matter of being able to take that no and keep pushing against it.
It's creative, right? If you get stranded on a desert island and someone says, like, I don't have a boat, and you're like, okay, well, I guess we'll die here. Or would you rather have someone be like, okay, well, I don't have a boat, but I've got 42 logs, some coconut strands, and some other stuff. Like, I would rather have the person that can look at the things that I do have and build me a boat to get off the island and just say, well, you didn't hand it to me from the get-go. So kind of that's what I've tried to do is like, okay, well, I don't have a boat, but can I like make a boat? What do I have to make a boat? How do I get off this problem island with the things that I have in front of me? And that's what I'm going to go do.
Creative problem solving. I think that is something we don't hold each other accountable for enough nowadays. Is, did you try the thing? No. Okay, cool. Did you try anything? No. All right, cool. Did you Google it? No. All right, well, I don't know what you want me to do. If you're not willing to help yourself at all, then how do we help you?
And it can be really overwhelming for people too, right? And sometimes we're stranded on a desert island. It's truly a desert, and we don't have those tools, right? Yeah. And so it's really something that I've been really fortunate, both with the fact that I have, in all these instances, had tools to make a boat, and also had people to be like, okay, Erin, go make your crazy little boat. See how that works out for you. And it works. So I've been pretty lucky in those instances.
Do you think that people who are on those desert islands, and if they don't feel hope, do you think that they can really be happy and have a fulfilling life? Or do you think they have to find the source of hope?
I don't know if hope is maybe the word, but I would go back to the bucket analogy, and I would say that we all need people to fill our bucket. I've struggled with anxiety in the past. I had a mental breakdown about 18 months ago, and had to deal with that. And it's really hard to find hope in those places. So I don't know that it's hope, but I know that it's relying on people, having support networks to help refill your bucket and help be those sources of like, you can do it, right? Support networks can come in the form of medical professionals or friends or family or our communities, whether that be our real life communities, our hometowns, our online communities. Being able to be fortunate and have either the ability to ask for help or have people recognize that you need help is really helpful. So sometimes we're on an island and we're not the only passengers, and there's other passengers being like, you got this, you can do that. We got you, we're here to support you. And sometimes we're by ourselves. And so that's when it's really hard for people. Is I fully empathize with feeling like people are alone. That's really hard. That's really difficult for people to deal with. But I think it's just really trying to figure out, well, what can I do to refill this bucket? Is it a person? Is it a hobby? Is it time? Is it sleeping? Sometimes like the only thing you do that day is sleep, and that's okay. And so I think it's just us really being patient with ourselves and giving ourselves time to figure out what it is that refills our bucket. And maybe that's hope. Maybe that's just self-patience. Maybe that's just our ability to empathize with our own situations. Sometimes we're often so much harder on ourselves than the rest of the world is. And so everyone kind of has to analyze that for themselves. But I hope that people are patient with themselves enough to either figure out what fills their bucket or ask for help for somebody else to figure that out, or has people in their lives that can cheer them on and get them through that.
I appreciate you leaning into the mic to underline that particular last part there. And for those of you who are listening and not watching, she just leaned in there on the part about figure out what fills your bucket and ask for help if you need it. And that, I think, is super important. Have you found a lot of good ways to reach out to your friendship circle to say, hey, I'm just not having the day today, guys. It's cracking. What do I do?
I think sometimes I also know that that's not a thing that I am particularly good at, is asking for help. So like I have to take my own advice sometimes. What I will say what I am good about is knowing when I've hit my limit and saying like, here's my contingency plan that we talked about earlier. And so like I need to do X, Y, and Z to get myself into a space where I can communicate what I need. But I also have had my really good friends. We are close enough now that they recognize and can see my behavior and go like, okay, I can notice now something is not clicking. And so my friends will proactively notice it and will check in and say, hey, I've noticed this is going on. What's up? Which is so valuable. And I'm so thankful for that. My husband recognizes it. My friends recognize it. And so my support network is really good at pointing out that I need help when I am unable to ask for it. So that's been really helpful. But I think sometimes just saying I'm not good, right? And you don't have to do that with everybody. Like there are less than a handful of people in my life that I feel truly comfortable going to like, I'm not good. And then, you know, they're always receptive and cool. How can I help? What do you need? You want to come over? Usually it's, do you want to come over? That's like the answer of like, that's my like healing thing is like, I just want to sit with a person in real life. And so like, I just want to sit and hold my hand and then I'll do that for 30 minutes. Now I'm like recharged and I'm ready to go. But yeah.
That's beautiful. I think a lot of us have that same problem, particularly people I hear doing this kind of show and on Twitter sometimes will say, well, I don't have a big circle of friends. I don't have a lot of friends. And sometimes, for me at least, I feel like friendship is more like a mountain, that you're constantly having people climb up your mountain and be towards the top, or they may do something and they lose a foothold and they fall down a couple levels. I think that's friendship is more of a range than a check mark. Are you friend? Yes. It's not a Tarzan situation. Me friend. So, how do you really navigate that kind of mountain situation? Have you gotten better at realizing that not everybody has to be your best friend? You can also just be, a low-level friend?
Yeah, I've lived a lot of lifetimes in my one lifetime. There was a period in my life where I was a stay-at-home mom. Yeah. And I had a totally different set of friends then than I do now. Back in that time, somebody said something to me that I hear it all the time, which is you have friends for a reason and you have friends for a season. And basically what that means is that like people, we are fluid, we are dynamic, we are always ever changing as people. I am the same person that I was at 15, 16, same introverted, dorky kid. I may have a different set of friends. I may have a different job. I may live in a different location, but we all change in different ways. Yeah. Sometimes we actually just become different people. Yeah. People grow and they evolve, and that's okay too. But it's important to realize that other people do the same thing. And so sometimes we're going to have friends for a season. Like when I was a stay-at-home mom, I had other friends that were stay-at-home moms because we needed the connection with other moms to be like, I feel you, what you're going through, like terrible twos are terrible. Yes. Do you want to hang out with our terrible twos? And we were like, yes. And I may not need those friends when my daughter is 12. And so then you also have friends for a reason. And so you have friends that are there for you because you have a hobby in common or because you have something about who you are as people that you're going through. For me, I have other women in the industry that I am friends with because we can give advice about being a woman in the industry. And I have other friends that like The Sims, and that's why we're friends, right? And I have other friends that we're friends with because we have certain things in common. You and I have our own reason for being friends. And so
she pays me really well.
That's right. It's all cryptocurrency. And so I think that's like what's really helped me is that like having friends for a reason and a season is okay. That I don't have to like be the best friend for everybody all the time. That like you are going to ebb and flow and change. And as long as we're just being good people to each other, that's enough.
How have you dealt with toxic friendships?
I keep saying I've been very lucky. I do feel like a very lucky person. I feel lucky that I've had few instances of those. And I think probably because I am very shy and I don't open myself up to many people. But I think that it is really important to set boundaries. Those are often the hardest things to do, is to tell somebody, like, I'm not going to tolerate that behavior. Like, those are uncomfortable. I do not like confrontation. I don't like it.
Same.
It's not fun. And so I think it really is saying, I'm not going to tolerate it. And if somebody was like, well, I'm going to keep doing it. Okay, well, now we're not friends anymore. That's my line. That's my limit. Boundary setting is vastly important for personal relationships, romantic relationships, friendships, family. We don't do that. We don't talk about that. I don't tolerate that behavior. And if you can't respect that, then you don't respect me.
What do you give for advice when people are struggling with setting those boundaries? Because we all agree they're important, but a lot of people struggle with it.
Oh my gosh. I don't even know, man. I wish my therapist was here. She'd probably tell you all kinds of like really important things.
I had someone the other day say, I feel like Steve is practicing to be a psychiatrist.
I mean, maybe. My gosh. It's hard. So many times, like, I feel like whether it's like me on a podcast or like other people, we get on these things and we're like, oh yeah, just set boundaries. It's so easy. And then somebody at like home is crying. I tried to set boundaries and it's so hard. It's hard. This stuff is hard. Yeah. Being a human being is hard. Just being a person is hard, especially when you get into these like very intense situations, like setting boundaries. That is not easy for everybody. I have one friend who I won't name. They are so good at setting, like, they set boundaries 50,000 times a day. And I'm like constantly impressed by them because like somebody will say something and they'll be like, no, not today.
Wow.
I can't do that. Oh my God. I can't even tell the waiter that they brought me the wrong food. Like, I can't do that. So I don't have any really good advice because I think it just depends on who everyone is and like what their tolerance level is. But I think just recognizing that for some people it's really difficult. And again, being patient with yourself. And like, if you set a boundary, you should give yourself credit for doing that because it's hard. But it is important, right? We have to set our own mental health and what we can tolerate and what we can do. And in the long run, especially if something is really draining your bucket, you've got to do it for you. You got to like rip the Band-Aid off and be like, okay, I'm done. And just be resolute that you knew that it was the right thing to do and like just let that kind of carry you through. But it's hard. It is hard. I don't want anyone to be like, oh, she made it sound so easy. Like, it's not.
A lot of those life advice things make it sound easy because you have people who say like, yeah, you just do this. Just be an open person who's good. All right. Like, okay, great. How do I do that?
Yeah, it's like when you have a lot of anxiety and somebody's like, have you tried not being anxious? Oh, yes. Solved. Yeah. Cleared. I'm good. Yeah. Thank you for that.
That's my favorite running joke with one of my friends is like, I'll be like, yeah, it hurts when I do this. And they're like, don't do that. I'm like, stop it. No, that's not funny. Yeah, what do you think about, someone who's out there who's just, as you said earlier, trying to be a good person, trying to do good things, make good choices as our movies in Hollywood would tell us, how do you check the box? How do you say, I am Erin, I am making good choices?
Ugh, what a hard question.
That's why we're here.
We're asking me really that I thought we were going to talk about like community building and we're just like having these existential life. I hope somebody finds this conversation very impactful. I pulled Erin out of
business mode. I made her talk about herself.
I know. I was like not prepared to talk about me. This is literally how I met my best friend. I'm talking about business the whole time. And then she was like, oh, okay. I would say there's twofold to it. I think one, if we are really honest with ourselves, we know when we've done our best, right? And that's really hard. Being critical of ourselves is sometimes both the easiest and the hardest thing to do. It's really hard to like look at yourself in the mirror and be like, I messed up today. That does like not feel good. But I also think it's really important to put people in our lives who will hold us accountable. And so there have been times where I may have an opinion or I may want to do something and somebody was like, actually, you shouldn't do that. And here's why. And I respect those people for coming to me and helping me grow because you're never going to grow if you just assume you're always doing the right thing, right? I don't know what I don't know and I can't fix problems unless somebody comes to me and tells me that it's a problem. And so I think between those two things, really being able to be honest with ourselves, did I honestly do the right thing? Having people in your life who will tell you whether or not you did the right thing and fostering those relationships. Fostering relationships where people feel like they can come to you and say, you didn't do the right thing. And you're not going to yell at them or like bite their head off, right? And then the last part about all of that is just being patient. You're not going to get everything right. You're not going to be perfect. Everyone is going to get things wrong, especially when you're learning, right? Nobody picks up a pen for the first time and is like, I'm now Picasso. Like, that's just not how it works. And so I think between those three things is how you do it. And being able to be like, cool, I didn't get it right today, but tomorrow I'm going to try. If you're just better than you were the day before, that's okay.
Being perfectly imperfect, I think, is the way I like to think of things. There are people out
Obviously, just do that, Steven.
Yeah, right.
So easy.
Super easy. I think there are people out there who think they can pick up a pen and just write a best-selling novel. And you know, I don't think we give enough credit to ourselves for learning and growing as a person. Have you had a lot of success with, obviously you're on a journey of growth. Have you had a lot of success telling those in your life to also be kind and let themselves grow as people?
Oh man, being a parent, that's all parenting is. That's all parenting is being like, you did not do that right. I think, yes, you know, I think we're like just culturally in a hard place where we have things like Instagram, which show us that like, oh, look how picture perfect our lives are. And you know, in videos, I edited out all of the times that I didn't kill the boss and only showed you the time that I did do it. And so it makes it look like first try, I did it. Right. And so I think part of it is that like, for better or for worse, we've kind of trained ourselves to expect that we're just going to get it right the first time. And that's like never how it is. If you look at all the outtakes and everything else, I used to do a bunch of educational sections for Twitch. And I would, in one take, do like a 6-minute video, like edited, no cuts, no jumps, just like 6 minutes. And people would be like, wow, how'd you get so good at that? I'm like, I literally did it 32 times. It's in 7 hours recording the same 6 minutes over and over and over and over and over again. But you only saw the last 6, right? And so maybe if we like showed ourselves the other 32 takes, we would all be a little bit more patient with that. But the reality is, it's like very few times, unless you're working with like Clint Eastwood, because as a director, did you know this? As a director, he's like notorious for like first take and you're done.
Wow, I did not know that. Interesting.
Yeah. Matt Damon talked about it on Hot Ones.
Okay.
Which I love. Anyways, if you want to go Google it, that's where I found out. It was Matt Damon on Hot Ones. But unless you're in that type of situation, like most of us do not get things right on the first time. We are getting advice, or we've done multiple edits, or we've filmed the same thing or taken 32 pictures and we only picked the best one. And so, yeah, I think one, just like understanding that and both being kind with myself and kind with others, that like, okay, well, they may have not gotten it right on the first time, but that's okay. And two, yeah, I think going to my friends, there are ways. Tact is a lost art. And so the ability to go to someone and not be like, wow, you really fucked that one up. Can I say that? Oh, sorry, you can bleep that up. You don't have to go to somebody and say like, wow, you really messed that one up, right? But you can go to them and say like, hey, I noticed that this is what happened. How are you feeling about it? Yeah, maybe next time, like, here's a thing you might want to try, right? Or asking, are you open to some advice? Not everyone is in a good headspace. And so I think it just has to do with a lot of like emotional intelligence and tact of like going to somebody and being like, I recognize you did your best.
Right.
Here's how I think you might be able to improve when they're open to hearing that feedback. But again, accountability is not fun. A lot of times accountability often masks itself as confrontation. And so if we can figure out how to remove the confrontational part of accountability and allow people to see that you're coming to them with the best intentions, that's usually when it is a little bit easier to receive that.
I wish that more people were better at tact. There's the other side of it too, where it's like, so some people are just like, you know, hey, are you in the emotional headspace to receive some really bad news that I'm thinking critically about you? It's like, well, they have to say yes. They can't ask. They can't be like, no, not today. Like, yeah, I want to know what it is that you're going to yell at me about. Like, you know.
Yeah, if anyone says like, hey, are you free to talk? I'm like, oh my God, do not hold me anymore. Like, I need to know right then, or my anxiety just like spirals so bad. But yeah, I think just depending on who you are and who your friends are, I think there's different ways for us to be able to have those conversations and say like, hey, here's the thing I noticed.
The worst text in the world is to get I need to talk to you. Let's talk later tonight at 9 o'clock. I'm like, well, there goes the next 9 hours because I'm just going to sit here and think about it.
No, I'm 100% with you. If someone's like, hey, we need to talk, I'm like, I will literally drop everything. Is everyone okay? Is something bad happening? Like, what's going on? And they're like, oh, I just want to tell you, like, milk's on sale at the store. I'm like, that's a text. That's not how we need to talk. That's a text. Just send me a picture.
I cannot believe we're literally 10 minutes over our hour at this point. We've been talking. It's been great to get you out of that business mode. I hope people skip the first 20 minutes of this and just jump right to the second half. Once I got you away from being Aureylian and being Erin, I love your advice, Erin. You have really, really good stuff.
Thank you.
But I'm not done with you yet. You gotta answer the final 10 questions. So,
right, this is the rapid round.
That's right, this is rapid round. All right. Oh, she's done her homework and looked at this. Okay, all right. Okay, so for those of you who haven't ever watched this before, I'm going to ask Erin very rapid-fire questions. Erin, you get to respond full length, one word, whatever you want. I'm not going to interject. They're your answers, your stories. You do it the way you want. They ramp up from silly to very, very serious. Are you ready?
I am as ready as I'm going to be.
All right, terrified. Here we go. What's your favorite color?
Aqua.
What's your least favorite color?
Chartreuse.
Ooh. What's the best thing you've ever tasted?
Oxtail risotto.
Gonna need details on that later. What's the worst thing you've ever tasted?
Those puke-flavored jelly beans.
Have you ever loved?
Yes.
Have you ever hurt someone?
Yes.
What is something that someone can do to earn your trust?
Be honest when it's difficult.
What does somebody have to do to lose your trust?
Not be honest when it's easy.
If someone spoke to you the way that you speak to yourself when no one else is around, would you be friends with them?
Yes.
If you died tomorrow, what do you hope people remember you for?
Being a good person.
The big question. Do you have a personal life philosophy that you would attribute to getting to where you are today?
Absolutely. Am I sharing it?
It's up to you. Do you want to share it?
Sure, I can share it. I share it all the time. Okay. This is a thing that I've said in like 100 different places. When I was 8 years old-ish, 9 years old, my mom, who has an art degree, was teaching me how to paint, and I ruined a painting, and I got really upset about it, and I cried because it was not perfect. My mom told me that a real artist can make a masterpiece out of a mistake, and she told me to keep going. And I think that is like woven into the very fabric of who I am as a person, by like looking at bad situations or mistakes and turning them into opportunities to do good things. And so I have done and been through very hard, really difficult situations and periods in my life. And that has been kind of a resounding, like, how do I turn this mistake or this really bad thing into an opportunity to be better and to like thrive and succeed? And I think that's like literally who I am as a person.
That's a great fabric to be woven.
Thank you.
Do you think that some things are better left unsaid?
Sometimes.
Erin Wayne, thank you so much for joining us here on
Did I pass?
You passed! You did it!
Okay.